When a narcissist pulls away, they aren't leaving, they're setting a trap. They've done it before. It worked before, and they fully expected it to work again. What they never prepared for was the one response that dismantles the trap entirely, and it requires no words at all. There is a behavioral pattern that repeats in narcissistic relationships with such consistency and such predictability that once it has been observed clearly, it becomes almost impossible to experience without recognizing it. The narcissist withdraws, and then they wait. What most people don't realize is that this withdrawal is not what it presents itself as. It does not represent genuine emotional processing, genuine need for space, or genuine disengagement from the relationship. It represents a tactic. One of the most consistently effective tools in the narcissist's behavioral repertoire, deployed specifically because it reliably produces a particular response in people whose attachment systems have been carefully conditioned to receive distance as a threat requiring immediate action. The withdrawal is bait, and the pursuit that follows is the catch. Pay attention to the specific mechanism through which this works, because understanding the mechanism is what makes the silence so completely disruptive to it. The withdrawal activates what is among the most powerful anxiety systems in human psychology. The attachment system's response to perceived abandonment. When someone we are emotionally connected to suddenly creates distance, the attachment system does not simply register the distance neutrally. It registers it as a threat. It produces the specific discomfort of potential loss, and it generates an almost biological impulse toward the behavior most likely to restore the connection and eliminate the threat pursuit. Reassurance, seeking, the softening of previously held positions in the service of making the withdrawal stop. This is exactly what the narcissist withdrawal was designed to produce, and it is exactly what the withdrawal script assumed would arrive, because in previous interactions, in previous relationships, it reliably did. Most people miss this warning sign because the withdrawal feels genuine. It feels like emotional distance that the target is responsible for having created. It feels like proof that something must be done, said, or corrected before the connection is irreparably damaged. The hidden reason it feels this way is that it was engineered to feel this way. This is where the script's assumed ending reveals its significance. The narcissist did not deploy the withdrawal as an open-ended experiment. They deployed it as a script, with a known structure, a predictable middle, and an assumed conclusion in which the target's pursuit restored the dynamic to the condition. The narcissist's control requires. The script has been run before. It produced the same result before. And the narcissist's confidence in deploying it again is the confidence of someone who has never seen it fail. Until now, there is a power dynamic that exists in every narcissistic relationship that operates so consistently beneath the surface that most people inside it never fully identify it while they are there. They simply feel its effects in the specific way the relationship always seems to tilt in one direction. In the specific way, certain behaviors from the narcissist produce an almost automatic behavioral response that the target rarely experiences as chosen. The narcissist is the less invested party, and the target knows it. Not always consciously, but in the behavioral patterns that emerge from that knowing. The pursuit when distance appears, the softening when disapproval surfaces, the continuous background effort to maintain a connection that always seems to be slightly more available to being withdrawn than to being freely given. This is not accidental. The perception of being the less invested party was cultivated through the strategic deployment of withdrawal, through the intermittent provision and withholding of warmth, through every behavioral communication that the narcissist's continued presence was something the target needed to earn rather than something freely offered. What most people don't realize is that the silence inverts this entire architecture in a single move. Not through confrontation, not through argument, not through the explicit declaration that the dynamic is unequal, but through the simple behavioral demonstration that the target's investment in the connection's continuation is not, in fact, greater than the narcissist's. Pay attention to what this demonstration does to the power dynamic, because it does not simply shift the balance. It reveals that the balance was never what the narcissist's performance of indifference suggested it was. The narcissist who is not being pursued is a narcissist who must now confront a question their behavioral system was specifically designed to prevent from becoming relevant. How much do they actually need this? This is where the anxiety transfer reveals its function. The withdrawal was designed as an anxiety delivery mechanism, a way of moving the discomfort of potential loss from the narcissist's internal experience to the targets where it would produce the behavioral response that restored the narcissist's comfort. Silence reverses the delivery. The anxiety that was sent outward returns because the mechanism that was supposed to deposit it in the target found no available receiver. And the narcissist, who was never prepared to hold what the withdrawal was supposed to offload, begins producing the behavioral evidence of its presence. Most people miss this warning sign because the behavioral evidence of returned anxiety doesn't look like vulnerability. It looks initially like a more intense version of the withdrawal. The hidden reason the intensification is evidence of anxiety rather than confidence is visible in what the intensification is responding to. Not something the target did, something the target failed to do. There is something that happens inside the narcissist's tactical system when the silence persists, when the expected pursuit has not arrived, and the withdrawal that was supposed to function as a temporary lever has begun functioning instead as a condition the narcissist must continue maintaining without the feedback they needed to determine their next move. The system enters a suspended state. What most people don't realize is that the narcissist's tactical sophistication depends entirely on continuous input. Every move in the script was designed to produce a specific response, and that response was the input that determined what came next. The withdrawal produced pursuit, and the pursuit told the narcissist system how to calibrate the re-engagement, how much warmth to reintroduce, how much resistance to maintain, precisely where to position the restoration of connection to maximize its leverage for the next withdrawal cycle. Silence provides none of this input. The withdrawal produced nothing, and a script whose first move produced no response has no information to determine its second move. The system is suspended, holding a tactical position that was designed as temporary, and finding itself unable to advance because the advancement required data that hasn't arrived. Pay attention to what this suspension reveals about the narcissist's relationship with control, because the suspension is not experienced neutrally. The narcissist's internal experience of having no data to work with is the specific experience of having no control to work with. And the absence of control in a psychological system organized around its continuous maintenance is not simply uncomfortable, it is destabilizing. This is where the significance reassessment begins, and it is the internal process that the withdrawal was specifically designed to prevent the narcissist from ever having to conduct. Most people miss this warning sign because the reassessment is invisible. It produces no immediate external behavior in its early stages, but it is running continuously in the background of the narcissist's experience of the silence and what it keeps arriving at with a consistency. The narcissist's defensive narrative can slow but cannot permanently stop, is a conclusion that contradicts everything the withdrawal was supposed to confirm. That this person may not need the connection as much as the withdrawal assumed. The hidden reason this conclusion is so destabilizing to the narcissist's internal experience is structural. The narcissist's sense of significance in any relationship was always grounded in a specific assumption, that they occupied more psychological space in the other person's life than the other person occupied in theirs. The significance reassessment is the process of that assumption encountering evidence that it may have been wrong, and wrong assumptions in a psychological system that depends on their accuracy for its sense of superiority do not simply update cleanly. They produce the specific internal disruption of someone who based a significant structural decision on a calculation that the available data is no longer supporting. There is a quality to the narcissist's maintained withdrawal. Once the silence has persisted beyond the point the script predicted it would break. That is different from the quality of the withdrawal in its earlier phase. And this difference, visible in specific behavioral signals that most people never think to look for, communicates something about the narcissist's internal experience that the withdrawal was specifically constructed to conceal. It starts requiring effort. What most people don't realize is that the narcissist's original withdrawal was deployed from a position of apparent ease, communicated through the specific behavioral quality of someone who is genuinely indifferent to whether the connection continues, who has withdrawn, because they needed to, rather than because they were executing a strategy that required the performance of needing to. This quality of effortlessness was itself a communication. It told the target's attachment system that the narcissist's departure was real and uncomplicated, that they were not watching a performance of indifference, but encountering the actual indifference of someone who had genuinely recalculated the relationship's value. But sustained silence, outlasting the script's predicted breakpoint, begins to strain the performance of effortlessness in ways that produce observable behavioral signals. The monitoring increases. The narcissist, who performed complete indifference in the withdrawal's early phase, begins visibly checking for evidence that the target is affected, for social signals that their silence is causing distress, for the indirect evidence of pursuit that their script told them would have arrived by now. The peripheral visibility management intensifies. The social behavior in shared spaces becomes slightly too deliberate to pass as unconsidered. Pay attention to what these signals communicate, because the monitoring is the withdrawal's indifference, revealing its own performance nature. Genuine indifference does not require monitoring. It simply continues to be indifferent, without the specific attentiveness of someone who is waiting for a result that hasn't arrived. The strain of maintaining the performance when no feedback is sustaining it is what produces the monitoring. And the monitoring is what exposes the performance for what it always was. Most people miss this warning sign because they have already redirected their attention elsewhere, which is, of course, precisely what produced the signals the narcissist's monitoring was trying to detect. This is where the Hoover without script arrives, and it is one of the most behaviorally revealing sequences in the entire dynamic, precisely because it exposes the targeting system's dependency on calibration data with a transparency that well-calibrated hoovering never allows. The ordinary Hoover, the one deployed in response to a target who pursued after withdrawal, who provided emotional data through their pursuit that the narcissist could use to determine timing, approach, and emotional content, arrives with a specific quality of precision. It targets the right emotional frequency. It deploys the right appeal at the right moment. It feels, to the target, almost impossibly well. Timed, as though the narcissist knew exactly when to reach out and exactly what to say. What most people don't realize is that this precision was not intuition. It was calibration from data. The pursuit provided the data. The Hoover used it. The Hoover that follows sustained silence has no data to calibrate against. The target's emotional state is unknown. The most effective approach is uncertain. The timing is being determined not by the narcissist's read of the target's current vulnerability, but by the internal pressure of a system that has been suspended too long without resolution. And this internal pressure-driven Hoover looks, from the outside, almost nothing like the precision-calibrated version. It cycles through approaches with a speed that reveals uncertainty. It shifts tone within the same conversation in ways that reveal the absence of confident targeting. It arrives with a quality of urgency that has none of the patience of someone who knows they are in control of the timing. The desperation is the signal, and the desperation is simply the targeting system producing its honest output when the calibration data it requires has been withheld for long enough to make calibrated performance impossible. There is a story that the narcissist was telling throughout the withdrawal, told to themselves, told to mutual contacts, told to the social audience that receives and processes the account of every relationship difficulty. And it was a story with a specific structure and a specific cast of characters that the withdrawal's expected outcome was supposed to confirm. In this story, the narcissist was the more significant party, the more desirable one, the one whose withdrawal would be felt with sufficient urgency that restoration of the connection would be pursued quickly, visibly, and from a position that conceded enough to make the power differential unmistakable. The silence writes a different story, not through words, not through confrontation, not through any explicit counter-narrative that the narcissist could engage with and reframe. Through the simple, irrefutable evidence of what did and did not happen. What most people don't realize is that the narcissist cannot reframe an absence. They can reframe a reaction, a statement, a feeling, or a position. All of these are content, and content can be worked with, reshaped, and incorporated into a revised narrative that continues to serve the narcissist's self. Image but, an absence has no content. The silence that was produced is simply a record of what occurred, and a record without content cannot be rewritten because it contains nothing to rewrite. Pay attention to what this does to the narcissist's social narrative, because the absence of expected content creates a gap in the story that the narcissist must fill from their own invention. An invented content constructed to fill a gap that the target's actual behavior failed to fill carries a specific quality that genuine experience never produces. Inconsistency, the details shift in response to social feedback rather than remaining stable. Because they are remembered, the account changes as the audience changes in ways that reveal construction rather than most people miss this warning sign because they are not positioned to observe the narcissist's social narrative in the aftermath of the silence. This is where the permanent assessment update reveals itself as the silence's most lasting consequence. The narcissist behavioral model of this person, the working assessment that determined which approaches to deploy, which emotional channels to target, which leverage points were available, has encountered information that the model specifically did not predict. The model predicted pursuit. The model received silence. A model that receives categorically unexpected information does not simply update one variable. It installs uncertainty at a foundational level, the specific uncertainty of a system that has discovered its predictive accuracy for this particular person was lower than it was confident it was. And that foundational uncertainty changes the behavioral posture the narcissist brings to every subsequent interaction with this person, not through any conscious decision to behave differently, but through the automatic caution of a system that has learned, through the specific experience of being wrong about a prediction it was confident in, that the models it was running may need revision. When you examine the complete sequence that the silence produced, the withdrawal bait finding no receiver, the script reaching its assumed ending and discovering the ending wasn't there. The power inversion that occurred the moment pursuit failed to materialize, the anxiety transferring back to its source when the delivery mechanism found nothing to deposit it in. The tactical system suspending in the absence of the feedback it required to advance. The significance reassessment producing conclusions, the withdrawal was designed to prevent the performance of effortless indifference beginning to strain under the weight of sustaining itself without the confirmation that sustains it, the Hoover arriving without calibration data and revealing its desperation through the transparency of its poorly targeted attempts, the narrative finding no content to work with and revealing its constructed nature through the inconsistency that invention always produces, and the permanent model update installing foundational uncertainty. Where confident prediction had previously operated, what becomes visible is something that the pursuit in every previous cycle had always prevented from being seen. The withdrawal was never confidence. It was always a question. Specifically, the question of whether the power differential, the narcissist's sense of significance depended on confirming, was real, whether this person needed the connection enough to pursue it when it was threatened. The silence answered the question, not with words, not with confrontation, not with any form of communication that the narcissist could process, reframe, or incorporate into the existing narrative. With evidence and evidence, in the form of what simply did and did not happen, is the one thing the narcissist's extensive reframing capability was never designed to revise. The script expected pursuit. The silence arrived instead. And in the gap between what was expected and what actually came, the entire dynamic that the withdrawal was designed to maintain quietly collapsed.